I've got some news for you. You're going to want to hear this one. We know that solar storms can disrupt communications and knock out power grids. But did you know they may also trigger earthquakes? I'm a science writer. This is our channel, and we're going to get to the bottom of these potentially very deadly space-Earth connections. For decades, scientists have reported correlations between solar activity and seismic activity on Earth. A few researchers even claim they've seen evidence of foreshocks in the days leading up to major earthquakes. But while correlation does not necessarily mean causation, the proposed mechanisms for how the sun could affect Earth's tectonic plates are pretty far-fetched, including charged particles from the sun entering your body and causing your heart to short-circuit. Not exactly something you'd read about in your physics textbook, and most mainstream scientists dismiss the whole thing as nonsense. So what's the real story? It all starts with sunspots. These are regions on the sun's surface that have strong magnetic fields, which makes them appear darker than the brighter photospheric background. Just like bar magnets, these sunspots can have north and south poles, and sometimes the magnetic field lines connecting them break the surface of the sun, creating a loop. When the magnetic field lines reconnect, it releases a burst of magnetic energy and charged particles known as a solar flare. Most of these flares miss the Earth, but those that hit our planet's magnetic field can trigger geomagnetic storms. These happen when charged particles from the solar flare interact with our atmosphere in the ionosphere, which is the upper layer of the Earth's atmosphere where most radio communications travel. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, geomagnetic storms can cause widespread voltage collapse in power systems, disrupt navigation and communication systems, damage satellites, and increase the conductivity of the ionosphere, which in turn disrupts radio communications. But aside from the obvious technological effects, some scientists believe geomagnetic storms may also trigger earthquakes. In 2021, a group of researchers led by Qinghan Zhang at the University of California, Los Angeles published a paper reporting an apparent link between local seismic activity and a moderately strong geomagnetic storm that occurred in February 2021. In the days following the storm, Southern California saw an unusual increase in earthquake activity, including a magnitude 4.6 quake that struck just 2 days after the storm began. The epicenter was only 7 kilometers from where the M72. Northridge earthquake occurred in 1994, one of the most expensive natural disasters in U.S. history. In their paper, Zhang's team wrote that if these preliminary results are confirmed and expanded upon, it could provide an important advance in earthquake prediction because geomagnetic storms are much more predictable than seismic activity. But as convincing as this sounds, many other scientists remain skeptical. One reason for caution is that the 2021 study had a sample size of only 14 earthquakes. Another reason is that there are a lot of uncertainties involved in identifying a causal link between solar activity and seismic events. That's because there are so many variables involved. For instance, the strength of an earthquake doesn't depend only on the amount of energy released by a solar flare. It also depends on the depth of the fault, the local geology, and the distance from the epicenter to where you're measuring it. Plus, there's the problem of proving causation. As Bill McGuire, professor of natural hazards at UCLA's Institute for Risk and Disaster Reduction, has pointed out, earthquakes happen whenever the stress on a fault line exceeds its strength. There are lots of faults around the world that are probably close to failure, he says. So you would expect to see some of them fail just by random chance alone. It's therefore extremely difficult to prove that a particular earthquake was caused by a solar storm rather than just being part of a natural cycle of seismic activity. What's more, there are lots of potential pathways through which a solar storm could hypothetically trigger an earthquake. As Zhang's team pointed out in their 2021 paper, the charged particles in solar flares could potentially set off avalanches of rock deep underground. Or they could cause a rapid release of pressure in underground fluids, which could, quote, excite the fault. They could also induce electric currents in the crust of the Earth, which might weaken a fault's structural integrity or directly trigger a rupture. Then there's the possibility that solar-induced earthquakes aren't triggered by the charged particles themselves, but by the light from the flare. That's right. Visible light from the sun could potentially shake the ground beneath your feet. According to a 2022 paper published in the journal Frontiers in Astronomy and Space Science, increased radiation from the sun could heat rocks near the Earth's surface, causing them to expand in volume. As the rocks cool, they contract again, which creates stress that builds up over time. Eventually, that stress becomes too great and the rocks fracture, generating an earthquake. The authors of the 2022 paper say this mechanism could explain why there were reports of increased seismic activity in Japan and Chile in the years following the record-breaking 2004 solar storm known as the Carrington Event. During that event, the strongest solar flare ever recorded by modern instruments blasted the Earth with 4 billion electron volts of energy, about 4 times more energy than the total power consumption of the entire United States in 1 year. But unfortunately, this light-induced fracturing hypothesis doesn't hold up either. According to geologist and geophysicist Jackie Kaplan-Auerbach at Whitman College, the amount of light energy reaching the Earth's surface from the sun is fairly constant, and it's just not enough to significantly change the temperature of rocks deep underground. What's more, the heating effect of sunlight varies significantly depending on latitude. So you'd expect to see an earthquake swarm in some places and not others, whereas various studies have found increased seismic activity across the globe following major solar storms. And then there's the issue of timing. Studies have reported that the solar-induced earthquakes happen within hours of a geomagnetic storm, which is way faster than the hours to years it would take for the sun's light to heat rocks deep enough to trigger an earthquake. So if sunlight and charged particles don't play a direct role, maybe the sun influences earthquakes indirectly by disrupting the Earth's atmosphere and ionosphere. But unfortunately, research hasn't borne that idea out either. One team of researchers found no correlation between geomagnetic storms and the occurrence of local earthquakes in central Italy. Another team found no correlation between global seismic activity and the 2004 Carrington Event. So, despite all the headlines you may have seen claiming that the sun causes earthquakes, the evidence remains shaky at best and fraudulent at worst. Some researchers have even accused each other of manipulating their data. For example, in 2023, one team of Chinese scientists accused the UCLA group of using cherry-picked data to support their claims. In response, Zhang and his colleagues accused their critics of misrepresenting the data. All of which brings us back to where we started, wondering if there's a link between solar storms and earthquakes. Well, there's definitely a link, but it's not the kind you might have been hoping for. I think it's safe to say there's no need to worry about a solar flare frying your brain anytime soon. But it's still a good reminder that the sun, which provides life-giving energy to the Earth, can be both friend and foe. And while we continue to learn more about the sun, we can hope that future discoveries will shed more light on this potentially dangerous relationship. Thanks for watching this episode of SCI Show Space. If you would like to help support this channel, we have a platform where you can support us and get access to exclusive content.